Our gospel today reminds me of the episcopal motto of Pope Francis when he became a bishop and still went by the name Jorge Mario Bergoglio. And that motto is stated in Latin, miserando atque eligendo. Actually, ang pinagkuhanan niya ng inspirasyon was the homily of San Beda, Saint Bede, on this gospel story about the call of Saint Matthew, which is one of the readings in the Office of the Readings in today's feast of Saint Matthew in the breviary. Miserando atque eligendo. This was Bergoglio's encapsulation of the title of Saint Bede's homily about Matthew the tax collector. That line that says, Jesus saw Matthew through the eyes of mercy and chose him. He saw Matthew through the eyes of mercy and chose him. Apparently, Bergoglio could relate with that line because of a religious experience that he had when he was still about 17 years old. One day, he went to a priest to make a confession because he felt like a miserable sinner. He does not say exactly kung ano yung kinumpisal niya dun sa pare at kung ano ang sinabi nung pare sa kanya pagkakumpisal niya. But apparently, he felt that that priest had done what Jesus did to Matthew. While he was looking at himself as a hopeless, good-for-nothing sinner, the priest in the confessional saw him as a potential saint. Bakit? Well, because he looked at him through the eyes of mercy. And it was then that he began to feel that he was being chosen or that he was being called to become a priest. One little act of confession had changed his whole life's direction. You know, in many ways, we can say it also changed the direction of the whole church through the kind of pastoral leadership that he has practiced since he became Pope Francis. You know, he has consistently exhorted on us Christians to learn to look at our fellow human beings properly from the spiritual lenses of justice and mercy. That these two lenses must always go together. That without one or the other, we are unable to see one another properly. The Pharisees were not exactly wrong in seeing a sinner in Matthew. They were looking at him from the spiritual lens of justice and righteousness as prescribed by the law of Moses. And what did they see? They saw in him a corrupt man who was allowing himself to be used by the oppressive Romans. They viewed him as one who enriched himself by serving as an instrument of an oppressive government that was imposing heavy taxes on the people. And so they also looked at Jesus from the same perspective and judged him as a partner in crime. You know, in the American TV episode on the life of Jesus entitled The Chosen, I have referred to it many times, and I'm sure some of you have followed it. It is produced by Dallas Jenkins, and there, ang portrayal niya kay Matthew ay He's a man with autism, but he was very gifted in mathematics. And he became a tax collector not because he was really a corrupt man, but rather because he felt affirmed by the Romans' recognition of his talent for accounting. He felt good that while all other people were ridiculing him, the Romans valued his expertise. In a way, he was no different from that character in Luke chapter 19, whom you also know, Zacchaeus, who was also a tax collector. And we're told by St. Luke that Zacchaeus compensated for his smallness by trying to get rich, probably thinking that wealth could make him look big. Luke tells us how his life changed when one day he climbed a sycamore tree in order to see what Jesus was like. That actually became the only time in his life when somebody looked up at him. Sanay kasi siyang being looked down upon. But this time somebody looked up at him. And of all people, it was the very person whom he was looking up to. That was Jesus. And the only thing this man, Jesus, had asked him to do was come down, to come down and to have supper with him. You know, I have a feeling that Jesus had changed Matthew in exactly the same way he had changed Zacchaeus. It was when Matthew experienced being regarded through the eyes of mercy that he himself learned to see others through the same spiritual lenses and began to turn his back on his formerly unjust and corrupt way of life.